This is Gress, G-R-E-S. And we are in Hawthorne, New York. Just outside of New York City. Gate of Hendon Cemetery. And done a few videos here if you've seen it from the cemetery. But you know, quite a few people of note here that I've touched on. But one that is just a lack, just no words to really describe the act. Just horrible. And obviously the people accused have maintained their innocence. One of them have been convicted, has since been released. Go figure how that system works. With these circumstances that he was convicted of, I don't see how anyone is ever let go out of prison. But apparently it was based on time served or good behavior, something to that extent. And this case, when it happened in 1987, I remember, you know, years later, this case would come up every once in a while, being from New York, locally here in New York, and it's made national news. It forever has changed. You can watch the train go by. It has changed the course of how adoption goes about. And as far as child abuse reports, changed all that, how they're conducted, at least in New York City, and I would imagine on a national schedule and a national template as well. So, and that's the case of Elizabeth Lisa Launders, or the name that you might know her as is Elizabeth Lisa Steinberg. She's buried actually in section 42, plot 9-8. It's kind of, you have to pay attention, or else you'll miss it, and you'll see what I mean here. She died of extreme child abuse and torture over several years at the hands of her quote-unquote adoptive father. Both the adoptive father and the live-in common law wife neglected the child, and it was the subsequent death, again, of Lisa that forced changes in how New York City handled both adoptions and child abuse reports. Born in Manhattan, Michelle Launders, unmarried college student who gave her up for adoption. Here she was giving her up for adoption, thinking that a better life could be for her, someone that's, you know, a family that's established. She was adopted shortly after her birth, and they named her Elizabeth Steinberg, nicknamed Lisa. Though, here's the thing, the adoption was never legal, in that he never bothered to file paperwork, the adoptive father. He was a criminal attorney in Manhattan, and she was an editor and writer of children's books for Random House, the publishing company. You've heard of Random House. So those two were, him and her were a couple, the adoptive father and adoptive mother. They moved in 1977 together, but they never officially married. Very quickly, he began to beat his common-law wife, and in 1981, Random House fired her due to her frequent work absences from being beaten, and this is things that she has admitted to, made public. Police think that Lisa was being beaten as early as 1981, although the first call to authorities about a possible child beating occurred in 1983. On the morning of November 2nd, 1987, the adoptive mother-in-law called 911 to report that her daughter was not breathing. Police and EMT responders found Lisa in a coma and immediately transported her to St. Vincent's Children's Hospital. Just absolute horror. Both cuts, cuts to arms, legs, abdomen, stomach, head. The body was covered in absolute filth. Hair was matted. Under her hair, the doctors discovered fresh bruises on her forehead and on her upper and lower back. Brain had hemorrhaged. She had been left unconscious in the bathroom floor overnight, while the adopted father had apparently gone out to party with friends. Lisa died 3 days later, never regaining consciousness. The doctors examined the adoptive mother and discovered she had broken ribs, fractured jaw, broken nose, severely lacerated legs, all injuries delivered over a period of several years. The police also discovered a second child, 16-month-old baby boy, tied to a filthy playpen, just covered with dirt and feces. Based on investigations that came out later, police indicated that the Steinbergs had been reported to Child Protective Services numerous times in '83 and '84, and how was nothing done? Yet each time, the social workers determined that there was no evidence of abuse. Mind-boggling. 4 weeks after Lisa's death, police had been called to their apartment on an anonymous telephone call to report a violent family argument. And despite seeing the adoptive mother with several facial injuries, police left the couple alone. And this is just 4 weeks before she died. I was always on the assumption, there's no canceling 911. Once you call 911, 911 is happening. There's no canceling 911. On January 30th, 1989, the adoptive father was convicted of first-degree manslaughter, sentenced 8 to 25 years in prison. The adoptive mother was not charged with any crime, and as of 2004 became a counselor for a battered woman. In October of 1999, Michelle Launders, Lisa's birth mother, received $985,000 from the city as compensation from her lawsuit against New York agencies for failure to protect her daughter. That is absolutely a case of where the system has let this poor child down. May 4th, 1981, November 1987. She's sad. Never able to experience life, and get married, have kids, graduate college, go to prom. And meanwhile, this guy is still out there living his best life. You might say, what type of best life does he have now? He's still alive. That's living your best life. Not to pass judgment, because we're not the ones to pass judgment. He has to answer to his maker. But inexcusable. Disgusting. A child that put their trust in you betrayed them. And me and Elizabeth were just a couple of months apart. 2 months younger than her. Both approaching our 40s. Now, she would have been 40 years old had she been able to escape from that awful situation. Very sad. Very sad. It always takes, unfortunately, a case to change something. It's never the other way around, where you're always working to improve on the situation, make things better. Something always needs to happen before change happens. It's sad, and it's always on somebody's expense. This should have never happened. Should have never happened. Especially when police was called multiple times. Rest in peace, Elizabeth Launders. May 14th, 1981 to November 4th, 1987. Beloved daughter of Kevin and Michelle, God's angel. Rest in peace.
Charged with her brutal murder. Those who gathered tonight to honor Lisa had their own special reasons to be touched by the child's death. Many were mothers who had given up their babies. Some were children who had been given away. Carol Jenkins reports.
No one can answer this question but God. But I'll still ask you, why didn't God help you? Here's a present. It's a Garfield doll from Adira.
A letter to Lisa written by young Adira Ribbon. At PS 41, Greenwich Village, where Lisa Steinberg was a first grader, mourners held candles in the darkness. They all shared something with Lisa and her biological mother, Michelle Launders. They were either mothers who had given children up for adoption or the children themselves.
22 years ago.
Any contact with the child?
Yes, I found my son. And when I found him, I found that he was kept in an orphanage for 3.5 years when I thought that he was in a home with 2 loving parents. And I gave him up in the Nassau County Social Services. So it happens all the time, and people don't realize that you give up a child for adoption. You think they're going to be in a loving home, and they're not.
The night was filled with emotion, but what the people gathered here tonight were asking for was more than emotion. They were asking for action, changes in the adoption laws to make it possible for birth parents and children to find one another if they wish.
I believe there has to be open records. There has to be some communication between adoptive parents and birth parents for medical reasons, for just peace of mind of knowing that your child is growing up and happy.
Having stated their purpose, the group walked from 11th Street and 6th Avenue to 10th near 5th Avenue. to the house where Lisa lived.
Gathered outside PS 41 in Greenwich Village, the school where Lisa Steinberg was a first grader. About 36 people carrying candles for Lisa, hoping the flame will ignite some changes in the city's adoption system.
A child should not be able to be given up the way Lisa was given up and fall through the cracks the way she did.
From the school, they marched the 2 blocks to Lisa's